For more resources, visit rymonline.org.
The Local Youth Worker is a daily podcast that's centered on 5 questions each week. Ranging from the practical to the professional, we're looking for answers to the questions you're asking. Whether you're in full-time, part-time, or even volunteer youth ministry, this podcast is for you.
All right, everybody, we're back. We're talking with Matthew Icard. I got it wrong again. Associate Pastor to Youth and Families, Clemson Pres. Yesterday we talked about some of the best things that they've done in ministry. Now we're going to the other end of the spectrum, asking you what are some of the worst things that you've done, some of the biggest mistakes, and obviously what did you learn from these, not just kind of sharing your biggest blunders, but what are some things that the Lord's taught you in the midst of that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess at the beginning of this last academic year with our parents in particular, I try to do a quarterly parent meeting just to make sure we're all on the same page and that they understand sort of where we're going with logistics, but more so just in partnering with them in the spiritual care of their children. Mm-hmm. And I apologize to the parents because it had become apparent to me that maybe it's best to kind of describe it with an illustration that I use with the parents. I tend to live my life like the conductor of a train. And so, I move from point A to point B on set tracks, and I shovel the coal, baby. We're going from start to finish as fast as possible. And I realized that I'd actually been doing that in ministry, that I had been pursuing certain definite outcomes in a very rigid way that if you kind of keep the illustration going, some people had never got on that train. Some people kind of came in and the train had already left the station. Some people were actually run over by the train. And so for me, I think the mistake is to think that ministry and that people are static instead of dynamic. And I want to be careful there because, our message, the gospel, is unchanging and unchangeable. But, when we talk about our methodology, when you talk about real people living real lives in the midst of real struggle, real pain, real joy, you just can't railroad them. Mm-hmm. And I think as a younger minister, I did that a lot by personality and even by maybe some philosophy of ministry stuff that I was pursuing at that point. Mm-hmm. That was a real mistake on my part.
And so you said this in the context of a parents' meeting.
Right.
You explained this to your parents.
Mm-hmm.
Did anybody speak up and affirm this? Thank you for sharing that. What was the reaction? And give us names too.
Yeah, specific names. That's a really good question, John. There was feedback, and I think the majority of that feedback was positive.
Yeah, it seems like it would be.
I think parents appreciated, what for us has been a new kind of approach to ministry in the past year. There were some that I think recognized that there had been real hurt on the part of some of the students, and so we talked through that as well and processed through it, and tried to enter into better relationship, not only with the students in the way that we conduct ministry, but also with parents. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that was, I think, a time of significant healing for us, and kind of turning over a new leaf and a new page, if you will. It's just interesting because I think I found that when you become vulnerable to other people around you in the life of the church, sometimes it can bring out both the best and the worst in other people, because you're kind of opening your heart, and for some people they come and they warmly embrace and they come alongside, and other people can kind of use that as an opportunity to really just get in there and slice and dice.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And I don't know if that I was well prepared for that, but looking back, I'm thankful I did that, and I think that it was good for me and for the ministry that God's called me to lead.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And that is, it's hard to admit our mistakes. I mean, especially in front of a group of people. But like you said, I mean, there's some obvious, humility and hopefully, like you said, some encouragement and acceptance in doing that. And we would hope that you can do that in the body of Christ, in the church. And so that's good. Anything else that you'd share? Any other mistakes or things as you reflect back over your years of ministry?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was sitting down with another youth pastor last week, and a group of students. We were just having some conversations and hopefully giving them some answers to questions. But he said that, I want to make sure I get this right, marriage taught him how selfish he was. Having children taught him how angry he was. And then I added to that, becoming a pastor taught me how much of a people pleaser I am. And so the way that usually manifests itself in my life is that there are a lot of times where I will actually neglect my own soul care and time and attention and affection toward my wife because I think I need and have to do God's work somewhere else.
Wow.
And that, by God's grace, has never really it's never gotten to the point where there's been like a train wreck scenario, but it is certainly, I mean, it's caused stress and anxiety and, this constant just trying to be 1,000 things for 1,000 people. And, that is just wear you out. And I got to the point probably 2 years ago where I just had constant back pain and going to the physical therapist and, they're just looking at me going, Matthew, this is all stress related. And
wow.
It's those kinds of things looking back. It's just that there are times where even in being faithful to the work that God has called you to, I just have to remember that I'm not Jesus. And that, the eternal good of the people of Clemson Presbyterian Church is not going to rise and fall on, did I put in 12 hours that day instead of 10?
Yeah. That's really good. And I'm trying to think, like you said, okay, getting married taught me how selfish I was. Becoming a parent taught me how angry I was. Yeah. And then you added becoming a pastor taught me what how
much of a people pleaser.
Yeah. Okay, wow. Yeah. I mean, that definitely resonates with me, and that's good advice. That's something good to hear. In the midst of you sharing people pleasing, and if this gets too personal, you don't have to share it. But did you ever have an elder, a pastor, a parent, anybody kind of say, hey, you need to slow down a little bit? Or was it really just kind of the physical pain you went through when you went through the physical therapist that kind of brought you to a halt and helped you to see that?
Yeah. I don't know that there was one conversation that kind of turned all that around. I think more than anything, it was actually probably my own parents that stepped in, and probably because they know me better than anybody else.
Now, are they at this church? Or
no, they are not. My parents live about 45 minutes from Clemson, and they attend a sister church in Greenville, South Carolina. But they have a cabin sort of up in the South Carolina mountains, if you can call them mountains. But we had taken a group of our rising freshman class up to their cabin for just a quick overnight retreat, trying to foster some more time and relationship. And my mom just kind of looked at me and said, "You look terrible."
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah. It's kind of like, well, yeah, gee, thanks, Mom. Not even 30 yet. But I think through that, it's kind of started a conversation with her, and it opened a conversation between Rachel, my wife, and my mom, and just the particulars and difficulties of ministry. And I think through that, I realized that my priorities were all out of whack. And that I was just giving myself almost exclusively over to, the responsibilities of the pastorate, or at least what I perceive to be the responsibilities of the pastorate.
Yeah.
So I think God certainly used His people to help open my eyes to that.
Yeah. Wow. That's great. That's good advice for all of us. And it's something, we hear, and, I would think most people who are listening to this are nodding and agreeing, but we can easily lose sight of it. And it's kind of, when you're in the midst of ministry and going through the grind, you can free it. Hey, I've got to step back. First and foremost, like you said, your own soul care, the private time to commune between you and the Lord. But then also, if you're someone who's married in ministry, not neglecting your wife or children if you have children. So that's a good reminder. Thanks for that, Matthew. You got anything else?
I don't think so. I'm sure I've made plenty of other mistakes, but maybe God is gracious in not bringing them all to mind.
For another podcast. All right. Well, thanks a lot.
You're welcome.